Good morning from a very foggy London, and welcome to the latest edition of CGY Conversations with. I'm especially pleased today to be meeting with Dr. Crystal Abidin, who is a Senior Research Fellow and ARC DECRA Fellow at Curtin University in Perth. This is the first time that Crystal and I have met, but I'm particularly interested in her research as a digital anthropologist and ethnographer. And what that means is that Crystal conducts a lot of research on internet cultures and social media and influencers and all those sorts of things, and with a particular focus on the Asia Pacific region. Now, Crystal, I describe myself as a youth researcher, and I'm particularly interested in, well, I lead the Centre for Global Youth. But what I'm aware that you probably don't describe yourself as a youth researcher, but I still really wanted to talk to you because I think so much of your research seems to involve so much of young lives and be directly related to what they're doing. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be chatting with you.
So normally when I start these interviews, I open with a big question that's just nice and open to, it's just a conversation about, sort of like, tell us about your research. What are you up to at the moment? But in your case, you are so prolific, you have so many projects on the go. I'm going to ask you about a very specific one that you're starting in the very near future, or you've just started. So you just recently received funding to do research on COVID-19 messaging and youth engagements on TikTok. So tell us a bit about this project and what are your aims and what will you focus on through this?
I'm really excited about this project. It was funded by the SSRC in New York, as well as the Werner Grant Foundation. And this is the right time to chat because we literally kicked off the project this month in November, which is 5 days ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I have been studying TikTok for some time, about close to 2 years now. Initially as part of my larger project comparing TikTok and Douyin cultures, especially in the Asia Pacific region. Naturally, when COVID-19 hit our shores, the contents on TikTok started changing. There were a lot of COVID-related contents, such as misinformation, health information, but among the Asia Pacific communities I study, there was also a lot of family-related content to do with COVID-19. For example, hashtag should Asian parents say, or hashtag all the misinformation from Asian parents. Apparently, if you sleep with an onion under your bed or drink hot water or do 100 of these things that are in very old school Asian folklore, the disease will not come for you. So initially, I was tracking these reactions from the informants, participants, as well as the digital ethnographic sites that I was looking at. But then when the after effects of the disease started to arrive in the second wave, and brought a lot of social cultural impacts, for instance, anti-Asian xenophobia and racism, job losses, international students being stranded either in their home countries or abroad, then TikTok similarly continued these types of narratives and personal sharing from young people, either from a very micro perspective as an individual or as macro commentaries calling out the state, the government, ministries, the press, so on and so forth. So my larger work already looks at young people, already looks at visibility practices, and already looks at engagement and activism. But it only made sense here for me to want to archive and document exactly how COVID-19 is being talked about in the social cultural sense, not so much on the misinformation, government restrictions and guidelines, but more of how young people are making conversation, helping each other navigate their ways through these places, and serving as role models and leaders in this space on how to talk to our parents about COVID when it's difficult to do so. So I went ahead, asked for funding to do this project, and I'm very excited to be kicking it off this month.
Can I ask you to take a step back and explain what TikTok is? Because I think while it's very widely used among young people and it spread through COVID to more parents as people were making TikToks at home with their parents, I still think there's a lot of there's less awareness of what that format is or why it's different.
Sure. I'm going to be cheeky and give you 5 answers. If you were to ask reporters who are clamoring to get headlines now, TikTok is that milestone app that is almost getting banned or considering to be banned from many countries around the world, prominently India, the US, Australia. The second answer, TikTok is a Chinese-owned app, and this was really surprising to a lot of tech pundits that something made not in Silicon Valley could go so viral and have captured so much of a global imagination. The third candid answer is that TikTok is a social media app. And this pertains to people who tend to be a bit frivolous and discounting the work, the labor, and the value of social media as mere frivolity, as mere entertainment. Because clearly now we know social media is the make it or break it for news networks and for information disclosures. My fourth answer, venturing closer to my research area, is that TikTok is an app that is really tied to the native core of Generation Z. What this means is that this cohort of young people literally were born into the internet. They take to devices and social media like fish in water. There is very little lap time for them to take up new technology. Whenever new features are introduced, they just hop into that bandwagon this quick. So the very fast pace of TikTok, the fact that when you enter a screen, you can only see one post at a time that captures your attention, all of that tailors to that generation. My fifth answer is perhaps the most reasonable and most comprehensive. TikTok, in short, is a short video social media app. It allows you to post very short video clips of between, say, 15 seconds to 1 minute of yourself doing just about anything. What is so special about TikTok as a video app compared to others like, say, Vine or the stories and video functions on Instagram or on Facebook is that on TikTok, one of the chief organizing principles is an audio meme. The way you sort through contents, the way you hashtag contents, the way you find memes and trends and remix them, respond to them, come up with your own versions as commentary, is mostly organized through memes that exist as sound bites or audio sounds. This means that in the same way I can show you a picture of a meme and say, remember this, remember the joke, remember how we use it online? In that same way, I can play you an audio clip on TikTok and people in the know will be able to understand, hey, isn't that the sound we use when we want to throw shade at people, when we want to talk about our troublesome parents, when we want to talk about how depressing life is? So the memeing and the attachment of social value, and also all the tacit conversations that young people encode, encrypt, decode, and socially stenograph on social media are mostly encapsulated in the bubbles or the vehicles of these audio memes. And that, I think, is the biggest defining feature and distinction of TikTok compared to its other predecessors.
I thought there were two other distinctive factors. I didn't know about the audio element to it, but I thought there were two other elements. One is which the app itself seems to have more control over directing the content that you get, so that they sort of, their algorithm chooses where to point you towards people. And the other factor is it seems to play a different role in young people's lives. So you have Twitter for politics, you have Instagram for your yoga photos, and you have your, you know, this is my beautiful body and my perfect life. And TikTok seems to have a different space. So what is this your experience of it from observing it?
So to your first point with TikTok's algorithm being different, there's a lot of conversation over how its AI is super smart, its proprietary algorithm, its black box. Even as a scholar and a researcher who's been in conversation with many people who work in ByteDance, which is the parent company of TikTok, and Douyin, a lot of information is not even accessible to me, despite having done this for over 2 years. What I would say is special about the TikTok algorithm is that it tailor makes by geolocation. So algorithms on social media tailor making content to us is not new. We see this on Google, Facebook, Twitter, based on our digital footprints and how we interact on the app, who we follow, contents we like, what we post.
Mm-hmm.
But for TikTok, there are true differences. Number one, at any one time, should we experience the app in what we feel is exactly the same way through our actions, our geolocation determines how the app feeds us information. So if right now, at the very same time, you and I were to search a keyword on TikTok, because you're based in the UK, I'm based in Australia, every country's TikTok algorithm is going to serve us a different hierarchy of content. And that geolocation boundary is more evident. The second feature about TikTok that is perhaps a more extreme version of what other apps already do, so not completely new, just hyper efficient and effective, is that the algorithm is always tweaked and tailor-made based on our micro interactions. So depending on how much time you spend on one post, how quick it takes you to click a like button, click a heart, leave a comment, all these time measurements and time units are reportedly informing the algorithm which video to show you next. So the feedback loop between us triggering something and the algorithm feeding us something seems to be a lot shorter and quicker than other apps. I say reportedly because even until today, between tech experts, the influencer and marketing agencies that I interview and work with, even the press and the journalists who write about TikTok, a lot of this seems coherent enough that it's industry folklore or popular belief, but nothing has really been verified by the company yet. So I keep saying reportedly. On your second point about how TikTok is so different for young people, I think I might beg to differ on that because it depends on who we're talking about. For various reasons to do with culture, language, a very wide spectrum of SES or social economic status all across the Asia Pacific region, it is quite hard for me to generalize and say young people use Instagram for X, Facebook for X, Twitter for X. I find that a lot of the studies, especially in the English language and in the global north, have the ability to do so because there's at least some coherence with language and sometimes some coherence with like a national or regional media culture or class and accessibility. But here, I cannot say this for, say, a group of people in the villages or slums in the Philippines and Indonesia versus, say, a first world super elite and rich country like Singapore. It just does not have that same level of comparison. What I can make an extrapolation on though is if I focus on influencers, because as a career category, they do come with a set of tech savvy and a set of social media tacit knowledges. And of course, as influencers who may be doing this full-time as a career, they automatically belong to a class that is not precarious, not on social media for job hunting, but maybe as additional income or to make more than their ends meet. So for here, if I were to extrapolate for influencer young peoples, I would say that TikTok is a variety of users. There are TikTokers who know that in order to go viral in that space, the main norm or the main order of the day is to talk about social justice issues, which is not too dissimilar from, say, the old heydays of Tumblr, where lots of popular Tumblr users often talked about politics, identity politics, gender, queer identities, LGBT issues, but as well as other more contention-sensitive stuff like single parenthood, the alt-right. There wasn't a name for them back then like that. So similarly, we see that young people on TikTok have learned that to go viral or to be talked about or to attract fellow peers who are in that generation of being politically conscious, these are the things that make you visible on the app. So if I were to really, really pigeonhole, I would say TikTok is where young people go to learn and to call out things, especially to do with social justice issues. However, I wouldn't make any commentary on, say, Instagram is picture perfect and TikTok is not, because with the influencer industry growing there, young people are supremely monetizing and professionalizing their craft. Like a 1-minute TikTok video could take them an hour to film and edit and splice, especially with those TikTokers who are really great at optical illusions and having really fast splices and cuts. That is so much effort and labor. So I don't want to discount that and say this is the lo-fi version.
Okay, but is it trying to give the sense that it is a bit more lo-fi and homespun, even though clearly a ton of work? Is it meant to be more authentic? So there's a couple of questions there, because you've almost implied that these influencers identify how they will gain visibility and influence and money is then by choosing a social justice topic rather than actually having a social justice motivation in the first instance. So rather
I think it can go both ways. So there are definitely influencers across platforms who have become influencers because they have causes. There's a special group of influencers that we may understand as minority celebrities. They are celebrities and influencers who become visible and popular because they're minorities and the fringes in society. They may be in a fringe religion, racial group, sexual group, and because they represent themselves and their community, and they talk about issues that matter to them, they become spokespersons and viral online. This has existed on many other platforms before TikTok, but obviously we see that happening on TikTok as well. There's a second category of influencers who know that as opinion leaders, very visible people, they have the responsibility and the duty to comment on social issues. And therefore, whenever something becomes relevant, they may chime in and say something. So it's issue specific. But there's still some people who want to be visible on TikTok And whenever there's something trending, they know, okay, talking about this gets me more followers. Talking about that gets me more viewers. And they may be a bit more casual in picking and choosing the issues they want to talk about. So I wouldn't say that the influencers pick a cause to be visible, although some are, because I feel that a very strong group of TikTokers there already have a cause and they use the affordances on TikTok for this to gain visibility and to be known.
Mm-hmm. What's particularly interesting about what you're saying is it's a corrective to what's the more general non-expert sort of understanding of what TikTok does, which is that basically it's a place where you go watch people do silly dances and, you know, do little memes of them singing to themselves. So it's interesting to see this nice corrective and see how it's a youth space for talking about social justice and politics as well. There's a little bit more awareness of it, I think, since the TikTok K-pop fans and the way, or the Twitter hashtags and the awareness of how pop culture can overlap with social justice action. I want to circle back to something else that you said there about the geo hashtags and the way in which you can have they can identify where you are and then provide content that's related to the culture around you. Does this mean then, do you think that it's easier for local subcultures and youth subcultures to persist rather than the content becoming very homogenizing?
Yeah. So to clarify, you can definitely try to find like-minded others by using a hashtag. But when you sign up for a TikTok account, you enter your location, a phone number, there is tracking to your geolocation. So your actual geolocation informs the algorithm on where you are in the world. Mm-hmm. And it feeds you content specific to your country market. So you are right that if we were to go on the For You page, that's the equivalent of, say, the Explore page or the Discover page on other platforms. The first batch of contents you would see before you groom your algorithm, before you select your esoteric tastes through your actions, would definitely always be related to your country, or at least proximately related to that. Because when you sign up for TikTok, there is also options to say, click on some interests, for example. Mm-hmm. And following from there, if you were to look at the types of messages promoted to you, you would see that TikTok often operates on homophily. So the more of something you watch, the more of something you get. But every now and then, they might give you an outroad or an outflow to another teeny tiny subculture that may have some relations to something you've seen. And that's how from this stream or this river, it flows out to many of these little tiny subcultures. And depending on where your attention is siphoned, you could potentially go into a different silo or a different category or genre of content altogether in that space. Mm-hmm. On your point about whether it's easier for local communities to then find each other and trend, I would say it's a yes and a no. It's quite clear from the research I've done so far that in the old days where brands used to be able to come together and say, ask people to use a hashtag on Twitter or Instagram to promote a message for free labor of users, you can't really do the same thing on TikTok because it's quite stringent on who gets to be a brand partner. For brands to want to have a hashtag campaign in this way, you do actually formally need to have a contract with TikTok, a platform, sign up for some sort of brand package with them, and then they allow your branded hashtag to be used and may even promote it to other people on the For You page. But if brands were to be found doing that vernacularly on their own, you often hear reports from the marketing and influencer agencies in my study that they feel as if they're being shadow banned or that their content mysteriously disappears or gets deleted after a while. So what this means is that for you to find like-minded others in a locale, for you to want to have geolocated subcultures, you're truly genuinely relying on the good faith of what the algorithm feeds you, or you have to make the effort to find like-minded others depending on the feed, snowball sampling from people who leave comments on the posts you're interested in, mutual following to see people who are near you or close in proximity and cultural interests. We definitely do see that on TikTok, it is very common for influencers or very prominent TikTokers to leave comments on each other's pages or each other's posts. And that is a way that people find them. Most of their comments from other TikTokers and influencers are the most liked, which I find really interesting because when influencers comment on each other's posts on Instagram, Sometimes they're very calculated and careful in that they only comment when a person is a member of their Instagram pod or their Instagram group. They don't want to accidentally amplify someone else who's not there. On Twitter, you comment when you have something to say. If not, you may want to stay out of an issue or start your own tweet or quote a tweet, because it's easier for that to go viral than for a reply to go viral. On YouTube, when you do comment on each other, it's usually kudos, props, thanking them, making an inside joke. But I think explicitly on TikTok, commenting on a video is also one of the ways to be spotted and discovered. So it's a little bit like going to someone's backyard and then like sticking a placard or your poster going, come visit my house. And we see TikTok comments being used in that way.
If you like this content, come and look at my content too.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how did you get interested in this topic, Crystal?
TikTok in general or influencer cultures?
You choose, because it's a broad topic. So TikTok or influencers or internet cultures in general.
I've answered the question of why I study influencers about a dozen times now. So I'll take you up on the challenge and answer why TikTok. Professionally, if there are new social media cultures that emerge, it is my job to study them systematically. When the participants that I've been studying for a long time, because I started looking at influencers in 2008, when they migrate to new platforms, I simply follow them onto those platforms and see what they do there, what is novel. Likewise, the influencer agencies I study are often looking out for the next big thing to spend their resources on or to groom talent on. Personally, as an everyday user of social media, I genuinely enjoy the format of TikTok. It's very unusual, it's very snappy. It makes me feel very old, despite being quite a young millennial. But I don't mind. I do spend a lot of time with very young people in my private life, whether through a combination of running youth groups, mentoring, or babysitting. So TikTok has been very important for me to remain relevant, cool, and to continue to have conversations with people 20 and younger. It is sometimes my lifesaver when I'm able to throw out a meme or relate to a conversation. So I would say it's critical for me to learn youth literacies, and youth as in really young people youth, not like UN definition of youth being 35 and under youth.
You have talked about, so I'm curious, was you're quite active on, you called yourself an everyday social media user. And yet at the same time, you must be involved in producing content, both for your personal, both for your academic professional life, but also for your research purposes. So how do you manage being online when it's for research and for kind of more official promotion purposes? And how do you find being an academic on social media? Could you even be seen as an influencer yourself from an academic perspective, given that you're one of the few that probably understand how it works?
I am, for the record, an academic who studies influencer, not an academic influencer, not an influencer in academia. So as much as I understand the techniques and strategies, and may occasionally use them, say, if I've got a new book coming out, I do not actively use all these influencer strategies on a daily basis or for my academic portfolios to groom a following. I do that not because I look down on this industry, but for a combination of reasons, in that it requires a lot of effort. It's not something you can do one time off. It requires maintenance over a lot of time. So if you start it, you have to commit to it. I also refuse some of this commodification or wanting to turn myself into an influencer in any form, because I think it's important to have parts of my life that are separate from work. So this might not be surprising, but I have multiple accounts on just about every social media. Some for my work portfolios, some for my personal secret use that no one may know about or only my friends know about. And of course, many different accounts for me to plug into different social worlds, different silos, or maybe even different fandoms, in which case I need to make sure all of these identities are curated properly and finely. I do have guidelines for myself though, on what I consider research social media or academic social media, and then social media for myself as a person who enjoys the internet as well. And I'm quite careful about how I balance both, how I mix and match both, who gets access and who is privy to either, as well as how to protect both from each other. I know it sounds a bit of like an oxymoron because social media feels so much a part of my life as a millennial and as a researcher, but for mental health reasons, for sustainability, for privacy, and also to ensure that when I interact with my informants, they have a version of myself that they engage with. That is very important. Case in point, a lot of times I actively promote my research and work on social media, primarily because that's where my informants live. If I send them a link to a journal article, they're not going to read 8,000 words of analysis. If I summarize that into a 1-minute Instagram clip or an Instagram post with summary and key highlights, that's how I'm communicating my findings to my informants. That is also how I snowball and gather more interested informants who are influencers, internet celebrities, and agency workers to dialogue with me and allow me to study them. So that is a very intentional strategy, but it's deeply rooted in my method and deeply rooted in the conventions of the groups that I'm studying. However, as most humans do, you sometimes form very meaningful friendships with people you happen to work with. So quite a few of the influencers and informants in this milieu whom I work with have become my friends over time. Some of us met when we were 18, when I started writing the first research paper ever in my undergraduate class on influencers. Some of them I literally have grown up with. We've attended each other's weddings, we've attended funerals and wakes from each other's family members. We've watched the firstborns being delivered into the world, first jobs, house moving. So as friends, some of these people who are influencers and agency staff are in both of my worlds, but they also understand the vernacular of what is shared in this space, what is shared in this space, how much can cross over, and how to make sure the contexts do not collapse between both audiences, which I very much appreciate because there are some high-level media literacies and trust that you have to maintain there.
Yeah. It's amazing also, but I suppose if you've been working on this for 12 years, you've over time built up. It's amazing how reflexive you are on the process and the experience of having these multiple identities in different spheres. And that over time, you've been able to build up strategies to maintain your different profiles over different spaces. So that was really interesting. And also, thank you for the suggestion. I hope you don't mind if I now suddenly realize if I take this, I'm inspired by you to go and think about how I could put my findings into Instagram or clips that will be useful. Because often we're told, oh, you have to feed back to users, and you're thinking, well, I'm going to give them a research briefing, as if they care. So, and even blog posts are a bit long, but actually using short form video or something like that is an amazing idea. So thank you. We've been talked a little bit about COVID-19 and how it's impacted the kind of research topics that you're going to look at. But I want to ask you as an expert about how you think it might change internet cultures. Because as a non-expert, internet cultures in general, because to me, when I'm reflecting on COVID-19 and its impact on research, or on society in general, it seems that the pandemic is, at least for Western developed countries, creating kind of a critical juncture that's upending a lot of our assumptions about how the world works. So in East Asia, they have experience of pandemics and lockdowns, and in many African countries, they've had viral outbreaks that have devastated societies. But this for Europe, for example, this is a novel experience for us, and it's changing so many of our assumptions. But it seems to me that while it might change social dynamics in lots of spheres, the COVID pandemic doesn't actually really seem to change internet culture so much, because the content might change, but the dynamics don't. So instead, how it functions is not going to change as a result of the pandemic. But that's an outsider, non-expert tin pot idea. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think it's changing internet cultures?
A big yes. That'll be an easy answer, yes, and then go to the next question, but I will not do that to you. There are so many ways to answer this. So maybe I'll respond in two different elements. And to do that, I do need to contextualize with some empirical data. So let's talk about misinformation. Prior to COVID-19, many religions, actually, let me rephrase that. Prior to COVID-19, many regiments, governments, and authorities in the Asia-Pacific region were known to have a little bit more of a draconian touch on censorship, on media control, on what citizens can and cannot say, even on the internet. And we're here talking about the level of defamation suits being handed out to people as young as teenagers who may have put up a provocative blog post or YouTube video. We're talking about political bloggers being imprisoned, people being sued to the point of bankruptcy for sharing what some would say is dissident opinion or anti-government dissent online. So that's the media climate of some of the governments throughout the Asia Pacific that we're working on. When the age of fake news becoming everyday parlance and vocabulary, in this part of the world, some governments responded very swiftly by enacting what we loosely call fake news laws, in that in the guise or using the context and the pretext of fake news now becoming an infodemic, a very serious situation across the world, the government paternalistically feels that they should enact new laws and guidelines in order to protect its citizens from fake news. And of course, you can imagine that if we were to link these two conversations together, this meant that some governments were able to enact, dispel, use these fake news laws in order to quash dissent and in order to put unfriendly faces or faces that they felt were non-compliant, voices that they felt were not very cooperative, diverse voices and opinion, they were able to stifle them all. And of course, there was some pushback from citizens, from activists, from civil society. But when COVID-19 hit our shores, it became very real of a threat that misinformation online was no longer just about your opinion about your political government. It was life and death. Wrong information would mean you could cause the pandemic to spread. A relative might pass away from drinking bleach, as recommended by a very, very prominent politician. So I think COVID-19 gave a lot of legitimacy to these types of fake news laws when they were enacted. And maybe for the first time when they were enacted, there was no pushback. People could see, just genuinely believe in the value and the benefit of it. So whatever active pushback that used to be there, watered down a little bit. And wherever there were citizens who were skeptical or on the fence about whether or not such laws should exist, they saw the necessity for it during COVID-19. In a few, I hope, months, but maybe in a couple of years from now, when we're able to say COVID-19 and the crux of it is in the past, the long-lasting effects of these laws being legitimized are going to stay, unfortunately. This might mean that we have a whole generation of very young people or very elderly people who feel that these laws were best practice for them and that the misinformation gatekeeping on COVID was especially useful for them, will be more willing to abide by these laws, not challenge them, and allow more and more control to be wrestled from the grassroots and civil society to the state. So I say this with a very serious tone and in very careful words, because I do think this is one of the long-lasting effects that will be very difficult to undo and require a lot of nuance for us to track, study, and even prove. There's already a lot of really great work being tracked by journalists and people who work as activists in these countries in this part of the world. But I think longitudinal research on perceptions, the application of the law, whether or not people still feel differently about it, is definitely very, very necessary. That's my first ginormous big answer on a very serious note about COVID-19 and internet culture. Are you happy for me to go on to the second one?
Yes, thank you.
Sure. On a more lighthearted note, I think we see here the value of meme factories more so than ever. So one part of my portfolio looks at how meme factories in the Asia Pacific region, but more specifically in Southeast Asia, have been employed during COVID-19 to normalize sentiments to do with social messaging, health messaging, political messaging, all types of different persuasions. I chose in my research in this time to focus on the positive aspects of such meme factories, for say, at first making fun of anti-Asian xenophobia as a way to normalize conversation about it, before then making memes degrading the people who are racist, or say making memes about how there's no stigma to mask wearing in the very early days where there was still so much fear that if you wore a mask, you had COVID. That was what people believed. So they were definitely very crucial and important for shaping public sentiment in this way. And I think this angle of meme factories from the Asia Pacific region is very important for two reasons. Firstly, a lot of the information studies, media journalism studies in this region tends to focus on the state authority, censorship, control. And for me, it was really important and refreshing to say for once with the crisis, there was almost something good that came out of it from the grassroots level. Even though now in November, many companies are brandjacking and also using meme factories in COVID-19 to market their wares. But for that moment, I think that was a really nice change or turn of events. The second reason I think this is very important is prior to COVID-19, most of the discourse in the popular media and in academic scholarship on meme factories focus on Russian bots, infiltration in the US, playing and toying with election numbers, armies trying to shape sentiments to do with politics. So there's a lot of a very global North discourse and political discourses around the uses of memes. There was also a lot of discourse around contentious issues in areas like misogyny and the alt-right and meme factories. And I thought it was important to talk about meme factories also for their benefit, for helping in times of crisis, sharing and spreading charity, teaching and educating people about health, but also warming each other's spirits up, opening dialogue and conversation by making very difficult topics like racism and abuse become common everyday discussion points through humor online before people are ready to address them. So this is a bit more uplifting, I feel, as a side effect of this time.
So what are you talking about? Are you talking about the emergence of a grassroots collective to use images to take back the narrative by, let's say, around racism? So repurposing racist imageries in a way that pokes fun and therefore taking back the concept and reimagining it.
In the case studies I have, not really repurposing racist images, but literally making memes from scratch. So this would be comics. This would be making a meme out of, say, a picture of a racist person who went viral on social media, and then attaching values to that meme, attaching specific messaging to that meme to spread awareness that A, this thing is happening. B, it's difficult to talk about, but it's okay for us to talk about it, even if in the very first instance in meme format. And C, for people to be able to feel comfortable about the boundaries of the conversation. So if you're making fun of a racist person online, is that your only avenue for redress? Is that one of the only ways you feel you can cope because you don't feel active or able or safe enough to call them out? And I think it opens up the different types of reactions and participation for people online to respond to difficult issues.
Okay. Thanks so much for that. So much food for thought there. I'm going to ask you a final question, and I suspect in your field in particular, which changes so rapidly, there could be a new app tomorrow and a whole new way of thinking about internet cultures and engaging online. So it doesn't have to be about internet cultures. You can think more broadly than this. What do you think are the most important issues facing young people at the moment, and what do you think we should be researching next?
As we opened this conversation, we talked about youth studies, and I am not a youth studies scholar. I study young people, and I've been invited to speak at youth studies conferences. But when I go there, I always explicitly say, I happen to study people who are young. In my industry, in the vertical I look at, a lot of them are young. But I cannot say that by diffusion or osmosis, I'm very well versed in youth studies theories, concepts, and core issues. So to put that out there, a lot of public conception is that when you look at influencer cultures and internet cultures, it's a young person thing. There's a lot of youth cultures being exchanged there. But I would say in my larger, longer term research, I'm beginning to look at a bigger, broader picture that is not just expanding the age span, but trying to push and expand definitions, public conceptions, stereotypes of what internet culture is. Case in point, I often ask my classes whenever I do a guest lecture, how many of you have WhatsApp family group chats? They're a very big thing here in the Asia Pacific region. And almost everyone can say even your 60-year-old parents or grandparents are on WhatsApp. And I go, there you have it. They're part of internet culture. How many of you have very young nieces, nephews, siblings, children who are often put in front of a YouTube video, who can sing you Baby Shark despite not being able to spell their own names? If they can, they are part of internet cultures. So I think it's important to think bigger and broader about what youth and internet cultures are without us conflating or stereotyping them. The next, if I can rephrase the question, what is exciting for me in this time, especially in the Asia Pacific region, is how savvy, how quick to adapt, and how much the government often tries to include the elderly in participating in technology and youth internet cultures, or what we think are youth cultures. So a lot of the discourse in this part of the world pertains to healthy aging, healthy living, aging well, using tech to age well. There's even small, cute adages that talk about how using tech makes the old feel young again. So there are a lot of discourses about how tech is the savior for older people to feel more connected. In terms of manufacturing and different companies in East Asia, there are modified versions of devices that are more tech-friendly, UX-friendly, for the elderly to use them and still participate in society. There are neighborhood groups, civil society groups that band together that teach silver-haired people how to make sure they keep away from scams on WhatsApp, from misinformation on Facebook. There are jokes like the good morning auntie, and every Asian family group chat has a good morning auntie. She's that persistent lady in her mid 60s to 70s who sends a good morning meme or message to their whole family group chat, even if the group of 50 over people never respond to her day by day. So she's like that nice neighborhood auntie. I would say a lot of my most recent research is going towards that direction, especially as the elderly in Asia, especially active on social media, and especially as they're coming closer and closer into the influencer industry, and that their different governments are expending resources on them. That makes me very excited, because despite looking at that group, I all of a sudden always find myself dealing with keywords and concepts that I thought would originally only stick with young people. For instance, did you know a lot of the old people on TikTok who go viral and are popular often receive comments from young people describing them as cute, or saying things that you're so hip, you're so fashionable, you're so wrinkle-free. So there is a different application of these same values and norms that we trade among young generations that apply differently to the elderly. Just because they can use tech, they're immediately cute. Just because they can use a filter, young people are immediately take to them. There is that exoticizing discourse there for sure. There's also a bit of
infantilizing and condescending. Oh, look at you being able to send a meme. Congratulations, old person.
On some level, there is definitely a lot of that. On another level, I think genuinely sometimes the young people who engage with them don't mean that intentionally. For them, it's genuinely new that post-COVID, anyone and everyone is suddenly on TikTok. So we have to remember that prior to this, when we didn't have prolonged periods of self-isolation, or before WHO partnered with TikTok to promote the Safe Hands Challenge, TikTok was deemed as a Gen Z young person space. But we can't claim that anymore after this year. It's been democratized and become so much more accessible that anyone and everyone is on there.
Well, actually, I don't think anyone and everyone is on there. I mean, I would say COVID-19 and the lockdown has finally made my mother be able to use WhatsApp properly and receive a WhatsApp call for the first time. Not joking. Tech resistant until very, very recently. So you can, and that I guess will change. You can see the role of memes in her life, her little meme groups they share every day, and they keep her, connected and happy. And then she shares them with us, and we go, "Yay, Mom! Please stop sending these images."
I want to challenge that a little and say, when I say anyone and everyone is on there, I think to be less candid and more clear in academic words, it would be that you can see a wider variety of demographics represented there. So sure, not every disabled person, elderly person, person who can speak English, low SES person is on there, but suddenly you see an explosion of representation from what used to be the tech fringes, and who go viral for that on TikTok and build a niche on there. People who live out of their cars and are still in poverty and still homeless are viral celebrities on TikTok. But that virality and celebrity doesn't always translate to monetary income and doesn't always translate to status, well-being, or security in real life. So I think that disjuncture between what visibility is online, the social capital there, and whether or not it translates to how we live our lives away from the internet is also something to be explored.
It's absolutely fascinating. And of course, now that there are more diverse groups of people represented within a platform like TikTok, the next question is, where are the young people hiding now and hiding their content from their parents? And when can I find out about it so I can be entertained? Thanks very much. I kind of want to bring this to a close now. I could actually talk to you for days and days and days. Your research is absolutely fascinating. And in particular, I hadn't realized how political it is, not just through its content or through actions that young people are taking, but through all sort of aspects and facets. So it's been really educational for me. Thank you so much. And I'm sure it will be for anybody who watches this. So thank you again for joining us. I can't wait to keep up with the rest of your publications. And hopefully we'll get to talk again soon when you've made some, when you've collected some more data on COVID messaging on TikTok.
For sure. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed being able to have the opportunity to talk about my work as well. So thank you so much, Avril, for this.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.